Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the deliciously air-conditioned peristyle here at the Toledo Museum of Art. I'm Scott Boberg, Manager of Programs, and I'm thrilled that so many of you are inside to talk about this remarkable installation by Rebecca Louise Law called Community. You're part of our community, and it really is the outdoors brought inside. And so I'm excited for you to share in the conversation she will have momentarily with Halona Norton-Westbrook. Just a couple of things that I want to talk about first by way of introduction. One is to ask how many Toledo Museum of Art members are here today. Raise your hand if you're a member. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Please, a round of applause for your support. You were critical in helping to make everything we do at the museum possible. Just a couple of housekeeping. I know most of you then are not first-time visitors, but if any of you are looking for restrooms, they're down on the lower promenade level. You can exit these doors. I feel like I'm in an airplane giving directions on exits. Or you can go upstairs and then down to the restrooms. My phone is out, as I like to say, not because I'm expecting a call, but as a reminder to turn your phone to silent. So if you wouldn't mind taking the moment, if you choose to take any photographs, we ask that you turn off the flash. So thank you for doing that as well. I also want to encourage you to visit with Rebecca Louise Law in Libby Court after the lecture. We are doing a book signing just outside of the store. So please visit us there. There's amazing publications that we encourage you to look at and hopefully purchase. But we encourage you to meet and visit with her there afterwards. And really, it just leaves me now the opportunity to introduce a remarkable person who happens to be the Edward Drummond and Florence Scott Libby Director of the Toledo Museum of Art. Please welcome to the stage Brian Kennedy.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Great to have you all in here on this beautiful day, but to talk about nature. You're going to see a work of art that comes from works of nature. This is, I think, the fifth installation that we've done with contemporary artists. Most recently, you'll recall Gabriel Dawes' wonderful Plexus in the Great Gallery. But it goes right back to the work made of hundreds of sound boxes quite a number of years ago. By Pinery Sanpitak, that was at the back of Canada, if you remember that. And these are immersive, multi-sensory works of art that we're trying to engage the community with to show how contemporary artists are engaging with the senses and with multi-sensory learning, which of course ties over to our basic method of visual literacy here at the museum. I'm from Dublin, Ireland. You know that, don't you? Right? Well, all over the world today, people are celebrating a noted day, a day that is the 16th of June, but back in 1904, it was the day that James Joyce went for a walk and a date for the first time with Nora Barnacle and took her to Sandymount Strand. And that day is the subject of the 24 hours of one of the greatest novels of the 20th century set in Dublin, Ulysses by James Joyce. And that day is named for the protagonist of that wonderful book, Leopold Bloom, and it is called Bloomsday. Today is Bloomsday. Now, what better day could there possibly be to launch Rebecca Louise Law's Blooms than Bloomsday? So I'm thrilled about that. The themes that you'll hear in our discussion this afternoon will be themes like sustainability. Rebecca Louise Law is totally dedicated as a preservationist. You'll hear themes of community and the gathering of people here in Toledo to help make this work possible with all those who've made all the other works that Rebecca has made possible. You will hear themes of empathy, and I think definitely of wonder. A work like this inspires awe and wonder, and makes us more empathetic as people, and brings us together as community. It's a most beautiful work. And Dr. Halona Norton-Westbrook, who's our Director of Curatorial Affairs, is on a 3-week stint at the Getty Museum at the leadership program of the Getty Institute in California. And she's flown back overnight because she has to go back there again tomorrow to talk with Rebecca Louise Law, with you in conversation. And Halona has been very much the progenitor and driver of a lot of our multi-sensory engagements, including this one with Rebecca. Just briefly about Halona, we have had her here for nearly 5 years, since August 2013, when she came as a Mellon Fellow. She's progressed through the ranks in 5 years to be Director of Curatorial Affairs. She actually received her doctorate in England, which of course is where Rebecca is from. Rebecca has her studio based in East London, but was raised in Cambridge in England. And Halona did her doctorate at the University of Manchester about museology, and her master's degree at the Courtauld Institute in London. But she's originally from California and did her BA at Mills College there. And that's how she started and made her way to Toledo. Rebecca has had an extraordinary career really over 10 years. It's been wonderful for her mother and her father, of course for Andrew and their child Alexander, to be here, and particularly for her mum, I think, to see how really significant an artist she's become and how the whole community here has engaged in Toledo with Rebecca and her family. She's done many works throughout the world, and most recently at Kew Gardens, a big display which is subject of a book. You can, as you heard earlier, you can have her to sign for you if you want to acquire it. It's very, very beautiful. But also in lots of different countries, in Greece, in Denmark, in Malaysia. And this exhibition here will head off next year. It's an investigator. Her next show actually is in Parma in Italy. So she's an international traveller here in Toledo, Ohio. I think we've stolen a bit of her heart. I think that happens when your child has its first birthday at the Toledo Zoo. So, can you please make most welcome Rebecca Louise Law and Halona Norton-Westbrook.
Thank you. Rebecca, it is such a pleasure and an honor to have you here and to be able to have this conversation with you today. Just wanted to start by talking to you about nature and the theme of nature in your work, and what that means to you and to your family.
So I was brought up just outside of Cambridge in England, and my parents had a house which was in a village next to lots and lots of fields in the fens, and as a child that was my playground. And we had a childhood where my mum, I don't know if she's here, where are you, Mum? Sorry, Mum, I'm just about to say. So we had a childhood where if it wasn't raining, then what were you doing indoors? So she'd be like, go outside and play. So yeah, we'd be out in the garden or out in the fields. So nature was just one with us as kids, and it was always about being creative in nature. So my mother as well and my father would continually encourage us to be creative in nature. So as a child, that was at one with me. So in coming into my artwork, it was an obvious choice for me to show the world how I saw the world.
Yeah. So you studied fine art at Newcastle University, and when you originally went to do your studies there, you were focused on studio art, but primarily as a painter. And I was wondering if you could speak about that and about how you started to incorporate some of those themes of nature in a broader sense into your work at that time.
Yeah, so I actually got my place on the course doing fine art at Newcastle through printmaking and painting. And I love the traditional methods. Oil painting was just such a joy for me. I love the layers, I love the time, I love the tones, I love the richness of oil painting. So for the first 2 years of my art degree, I really concentrated on that. But I felt incredibly frustrated by the working 2D. And after 2 years of constantly getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, I really felt like I wanted to work outside of the canvas, and I couldn't work out how I could paint in the air. That's how I saw it. So I spent the next couple of years experimenting with all kinds of materials, and I made these pretty hideous installations with food and material, anything that I could find which could be possibly a palette similar to oil paints. And then finally I used flowers, and it was just like it clicked. And the flowers, not only were they about nature, which was on my heart, which I was always trying to reflect through my paintings and my printmaking, but they could provide a palette. So I remembered my parents when I was young, they dried flowers in our attic, and that's where we would go when it was raining, is the attic. So yeah, and I just was like, oh, of course I can use flowers. And then from then on,
So was it as when you made that first installation with the flowers, did something click for you at that moment?
well, I remember I finished my third year. We had a 4-year art degree, and I finished my third year, and I thought my installation was horrible. And I came home for the summer, and I thought, this is terrible. I've got 1 more year of art school, and I'm making that, and it's really bad. And but I did want the struggle is that I was getting closer and closer to walking into a painting, which is what I kind of wanted to do, is that have that physicality of colour. But I was getting further and further away from nature. And over the summer, at home, my dad had a nursery garden. My dad's a gardener, and it was full of dahlias. And suddenly it was just like, there it is, like every colour you could possibly ever want. And I remember saying to my dad, can I dry those? Can you dry a dahlia? And he was like, well, yeah, sure, I'm sure you can, kind of thing. And so then I was like, okay, right. So I filled up the whole car. I drove back to university in September. I was in charge of the installation committee. There was this space. I blocked it out for myself for a month. And then I made my first installation with just flowers. And it's called Dahlia, actually. It's in the book. But you'll see how I've come from being a painter to this. You'll see the transition, because it is still a square or rectangle, shape, but it's above your head instead of in front of you. So I'm still afraid to move from that surface, but you'll see it's changed. It's inverted. It's above you. But yeah, you can see the transition in that picture. But for me, instead of the viewer being completely immersed in colour and being in the painting, I suddenly realised how naive I was in using a natural material. And this material was alive, it had to die, and it was fragile. And it came with so much symbolism. It wasn't just about having a new palette, it was about this whole new world of botanics that I had no idea about.
Yeah, and kind of the intensity of the life cycle of things, which plays itself out so dramatically with flowers. So it's almost as if you can't help but contend with that or work with that in the body of work.
Yeah, and I felt really naive to what I was working with. And I actually felt slightly embarrassed when people would ask me about flowers, because yes, my dad was a gardener, but he was the gardener. I was the artist, So it was about re-educating myself.
So want to talk more about the installation specifically, but before we get too far away from your kind of early studies, I was hoping you could share with us about some of the artists who were a particular influence to you.
Yeah, so at the time, I was fascinated with Rothko, and I had gone to an exhibition where I was surrounded by Rothkos, and in the room, it really transported me, and I felt like it must be tapping into colour that was transporting me physically. So that became a bit of a mission for me to try and, in some way, get back to that experience. But then I felt like, but that was done so long ago, and I don't want to copy Rothko, and I want to have that physical experience with my work, and I want the viewer to be experiencing something that is not just visual. So it was Rothko, I would say, at the time, it made me feel like there was a route that I needed to go down, and I had to do it for myself.
I think that's so interesting because when I first saw your work, I did make the connection to Rothko, because what really struck me as a correlation between the two of you was how Rothko and other color field painters, to a certain extent, were interested in kind of speaking to universal truths through, immersive experiences with color in particular. And I felt that coming through your work from the very first time I saw it. So we've talked a little bit about what you call painting with flowers. Was there more that you wanted to say about that process in particular and what you have kind of discovered over time?
I suppose for me, painting with flowers, I don't know if you've all been up there, but this is the first time that I've created an installation which I really feel is exactly where I wanted to be all that time ago. So it's 15 years ago that I made Dahlia, and yesterday we showed all of the staff from the museum the space, and I just physically felt a click, and it was when everyone was moving in the space. There was enough room to find a space for yourself, but the installation came alive with people being in it, and the idea of stepping into a painting and this physical experience with enough room to really take in and observe nature and the beauty that we're given on this earth. I felt like for the first time it was happening. And I feel like with Canada it's big enough to do that.
So I would just share that, so as Brian mentioned, I've been away all week for the final days of this installation, which as the curator is difficult, but I knew that it was in very good hands with Rebecca and with the team here. But when I walked through the doors this morning, I was so curious and anxious to see what it had become. And I'm not making this up, and I wonder if you're in the audience, because as I came in, I heard somebody say, I feel like that was the perfect place, the place where I wish I could be held forever.
Oh.
And I just think that, I don't know who said it. And I think that really speaks to the magic of what you do, and that what we want to help support here at Toledo Museum of Art is create those experiences for people.
Wow.
I thought we could talk a little bit about the just ephemeral nature of the work, and I know you have some specific ways that influenced you early on, and of course dealing with the life cycle and the symbolism of the life cycle and the flower, but then how you have transitioned in your thinking, and your thinking has evolved about the work being about preservation.
Yeah, so at the time when I created Dahlia, Anya Galaccio was doing her piece at Tate, and there was like a parallel going on at the same time with ephemeral artists and decay. So I thought, oh, well, that's what I am then. I'm part of that. And I started experimenting with decay too. But it didn't sit right with me. And every time I was kind of going down the decay route, I was trying to cling on to life and to preservation. So I think over the years, my art practice has really been about the process and understanding it, and actually understanding flowers as a material, and having respect for it as a material and value as a material. So in 15 years, I've dedicated my life to understanding the flower and preserving the flower to be able to outlive me and to be able to be as strong as paint. Mm-hmm. So I've dedicated so much time to this that now when I create an installation, I know that flowers are fragile. I'm not naive to that, but we insert copper wire into every single flower to give it strength, to be able to hold up for longer. We also air dry and make sure that the humidity is right for the flowers. If a flower has fallen off an installation, then nothing is wasted, it all gets kept. Mm-hmm. When you go into that installation upstairs, any petal that's ever fallen will be restrung into the petal strands, which you'll see immediately in front of you on the right. Any flower that's ever fallen gets put into flower strands, which you'll see on the far right at the closest right corner. And then any dust I put into boxes in storage and encase it. So the final stage of the flower is the dust, which is tiny fragments of petals and flower that then goes behind glass. And actually I'm coming back for the residency here in September, and I've already set them the challenge of helping me in that stage with these more permanent pieces. But for me, I'm holding on to this material, but I truly see so much value in it. Mm-hmm. And I know and I understand the circle of life, and I'm not against the circle of life. And I think that in terms of floristry and flowers and how much joy they give, and that the moments that fresh flowers give, that is so important to us as well. And with gardening and that cycle, in the whole feng shui thing, I'm not against that, but that's not my art practice. And my art practice is about using this material because I want the human being to be able to interact with nature longer than a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So the residency is the GAP residency that happens at the Glass Pavilion, and so Rebecca will be coming back in September to take part of that, so we're really excited about that. So speaking to what you just said, when you are in the installation, and in all of the other installations of yours that I've been in, there is this kind of incredible quality of stillness that you can sometimes find and really connect with. So that's my own personal feeling that really engages me with the work on a very visceral level. But I was hoping that as the artist, you could speak to what it is that you want people to walk away from the experience with.
I personally am blown away by nature, and that is my ultimate inspiration. And I never know enough, and the more I know, the less I know, and I just still feel like in awe of what we have here on this earth. And so to try and capture just a tiny bit of that and experience just a tiny bit of that and treasure it in a space, I hope that the viewer, through observation and physically being in their spaces with, it's 500,000 flowers upstairs, that appreciation of what we have been given on this earth will just bring that kind of, I suppose it's spiritual, or it's a presence of the beauty that we have been given on this earth.
Absolutely. I thought that we could transition into talking a little bit more about the specifics of this project and what you felt when you first came to Toledo And just to explain to the audience, when we do a project like this with a contemporary artist that's site-specific, it's often a couple of years in the making. And one of the things that first happens is that we invite the artist to do a site-specific visit. So before anything is signed, any formal agreement has been made, we invite the artist to come here and spend a couple of days with the staff and in the community looking at the collection, because what we're really trying to champion is artistic practice and giving artists a platform to be inspired and create, because we feel that's an incredible gift that we can share with the community. And so we had you come out here for a site visit before we had a firm idea of what it would be. So I thought maybe you could start by talking about that.
Yeah. So I have to start with saying that I came out with a 3.5-month-old baby. I was really naive to when I could start to kind of travel with a child, but I came raw, I came with my family, I came with my husband and my child, and I had about 48 hours to see the space, meet Halona and Brian, and get an idea for what I really wanted to create. And actually, Brian said to me, what do you want to do? Let's do it. But, just whatever you go to the furthest and highest of wherever you want to go next, and we'll try and make it happen. So I was like, okay, well, let's, see where I want to take that, because that's such an incredibly generous offer. And then at the time, I just came in a very raw place. So for me, it was about, it's about community. I'm coming with my child, I'm coming with my husband, and the whole experience here, like Halona invited me to her house for dinner because I had a baby with me, and within 48 hours I had met the Apollo Society and the ambassadors and these amazing community groups that made up the museum. And then I heard about all of these incredible things that were generously given to the Toledo community through the museum, and I was just completely and utterly blown away. So I felt like, I can't do anything other than do a piece about community. And every single one of my installations is made up of hundreds of hands that make my wired garlands, and I felt like, I'll bring what I have. So all of my previous installations and all of those hands that have made those, as well as combining it with the Toledo community. So I felt really passionate about all of these groups that are connected to the museum taking ownership of this artwork and being a part of it. So this is what I said to Brian. I was like, I really want to get everyone to make this artwork with me. And he's like, okay, we can do that. And, I can only do that if I'm already tapping into something which already exists. But I kind of felt like I want to tell the world about this place, because you really are doing so much. So immediately it was about community. And then you asked me, Halona was like, who do you want to bring? And I was like, my community. I want my community. I want my team. I want the people that really make it work for me and support me 100%. So you allowed me to bring my parents and my husband and my baby, and then my 4 trusted work members that have been a part of my team and really, really worked solidly for me throughout so many installations. And I wasn't quite sure how it would work, and I really wanted the plants to be from Toledo. I really wanted the hands to be from Toledo. I really wanted the plants to be planted back into Toledo. I didn't want any waste at all. This is the first time that I've been able to use plants that are reused and not cultivated plants. And all of those things are such a challenge. And just bringing all of those groups together is really hard.
Yeah. And I think just having worked together on this project in the last year, that it has reinforced for me how meaningful it is for the museum and for the community when we give an artist that we really believe in a platform. Because I feel like there's things about your own practice that have been enriched and clarified for you through engaging in this project. And I think one of them, as you speak to so eloquently, is about the community, and that it's very much about instilling that sense of connection with nature and connection with one another, and that sense of empathy and wonder that Brian spoke about, but inviting everybody to take part of that. And I think that has been an incredibly powerful part of what you have created here, and I'm very certain it's going to follow you in the next project and the next and the next, and so that is very exciting to see. So let's talk a little bit, because people are interested in the practicalities too. So we started with the vision, and we wanted to obviously do it because it was such a great idea and this theme of community emerged. But we went back and forth, remember, and we had some different discussions about what it could look like. At first, we thought about growing even more plants in Toledo and having the installation be part of that to an even greater extent. But then in our discussions, and when Claude Fixler, our exhibition designer, and I came to visit you in London, it really became clear that it should be the bringing together of everything from the past that you have done and adding the new to that in a very deliberate and intentional way. So I don't know if you want to speak to that as well.
Yeah, I think in the past, when the pressure has been completely on the group that is making the installation for the space, it's really, really intense and very, very hard work. And the production, it has to be brilliant and spot on. So it's actually really tough. And we sat together and we said, well, this voluntary experience shouldn't be like going into a sweatshop. So it needs to be that it is bringing together of people in a nice way. Mm-hmm. So there's 520,000 flowers up there, and 10,000 we've done here. Mm-hmm. And we kept it realistic. And the point was about participating, not production necessarily, mm-hmm. And being part of a bigger thing in a pleasant way.
And I think that's such a beautiful metaphor and so appropriate for the Toledo Museum of Art, because everyone who's in this room, who's engaged in the community of the museum right now, everyone who's on staff, we do our very best to create something absolutely beautiful and bring new things in. But we're always building on the tradition and the history of what's there and the good work that other people have done long before us. And I think that's a really kind of beautiful parallel I see with what you create too, because to me, what's spectacular in part about the installation is that it's all these different experiences, these different installations that you've created over time that are coming together. You couldn't create that now just wanting to do it this year. It's years and years of work that come together. And I think that's very much speaks to the feeling I have whenever I'm in this building.
Yeah. I was blown away actually by this building in particular, with Florence Libby during the crisis actually saying that she wanted to build this so that there was employment. And I just think that's an incredible legacy. That really touched me in thinking about the title as well.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to add? I want to have some additional remarks and then obviously open it up for questions. But was there anything else that you feel we didn't touch upon yet?
No, I don't think so.
I'm sure it'll come up in the questions. But I wanted to share a little bit about, Brian mentioned I've been at this Getty Leadership Institute program, which has been really wonderful for me in the past week, and I'm so thankful to the museum for supporting me in going to that program. But we had a day last week where we were talking about something that's called the Culture Track Survey, which is a survey that's done every couple of years to assess the kind of climate of culture in the United States. And there was something about the most recent survey that really jumped out to me. And it was that the number one reason people say they want to come to the museum or any cultural institution right now is for fun. They want to have fun. So there's different ways you can take that. You can say, well, I like to have fun too, but you can also say, isn't the museum or cultural institution supposed to be for something more serious? But then I thought about another piece of information that's in that survey, which is about motivators for people to go to the museum. And there's something new that has emerged in the last few years, and that is that across the board, people cite high stress as a reason they want to come to the museum. And it's every single age group. And so when you start to reflect on that, about people feeling stress in their life, wanting release, and also a desire for fun, really what people are talking about is a deeper connection and about empathy and wonder and wanting to feel present. And I just think your work speaks so, so beautifully to that. So I just wanted everybody to acknowledge Rebecca's amazing work in that regard. And then I was hoping we could turn on the house lights. Slowly. Because I want to do something that we actually don't usually do. And the reason we don't usually do this is because we end up missing people, and then they feel bad that they're left out. But because this has been such an amazing community effort and has been such an extraordinary effort on the part of our staff, I really want to take a moment to call out people who are here or people who work at the museum who have been a special part of this project. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you to Claude Fixler, our exhibition designer, and I don't know if Claude is here.
No, he's away.
He's away, but we'll acknowledge him in his absence, and Lori Mott, who is our exhibitions manager. They have both been incredible working behind the scenes.
Don't know.
And then I'm going to read through just a list of other people who've been involved and talk a little bit about what they've done. So our art preparators who work tirelessly behind the scenes and make everything that you see and are part of this incredible experience that we all share. So Joe Lalonde, John Hummel, Russ Curry, and Jason DePriest. And then working very closely with me, Tammy Landis and Laura Deiger have been an incredibly important part of this project. And coordinating our entire volunteer effort has been Maria Iafelice in education and her two interns, Stephanie Zidmal and Asma Walton. And then documenting the entire process in our marketing department has been Justin Camuso, and he's been assisted by his intern, Miranda Gorinsky. And Aaron Jezanowski in our graphic design department has helped to create some of the beautiful graphics that you've seen. And then there's a really important part of the installation that actually we didn't talk about yet, which is about the element in the work that is the gathering together of material from the Toledo Museum of Art grounds. So over the past year, our grounds crew has worked to gather up natural elements, and they are now incorporated in the installation. So just to acknowledge our grounds crew, which is headed by Mike Grabiel. And then supporting him is Macon Makmar, Stan Gilbert, Lydia Ng, and Kevin McReevy. So thank you to them too. And then, yeah. So Rebecca and I were making this list together, and it was getting very long. So I'm almost through, but I think it's important to acknowledge this. And then for our development staff who do so much work behind the scenes as well, Megan Stone, Susan Wilson, and Liz Links. Our conservation team, Suzanne Hargrove, Stephanie Spence, and Jeff Boyer. And then in the family center, which Rebecca has often taken advantage of while she has been here, Regina Jankowski and Grace Toth. And then, Rebecca, I think you should also acknowledge your family and volunteers by name, your team, I should say, by name.
So, well, my mother and father came out, so my mum, if you want to wave, and my dad, and then there's Simon and Philip. Where are you? Oh, yeah. Simon, Philip, Tracy and Flo. They all came out from the UK as well. And where's my husband? I can't even see where you are. Andy. Where is he? Oh, is he with Alexander? So my husband's with my baby, but yeah.
And Simon and...
Yeah,
you said, okay, great. Wanted to make sure we got everybody. And then, so I thought that in addition to that, I would just like everybody who was part of the installation in a volunteer capacity, maybe you were here stringing flowers, if you could stand for a moment so that we could acknowledge everybody who has been a part of this. I think it will be really powerful for people to see. And we thank you so much for that. And of course, thank you to Brian Kennedy, because without Brian's support, we would not have brought this project here and we would not have realized it. So it really is a group effort, and it really takes support of the leadership to create experiences like this that include everyone. And so with that being said, I think that we could open it up to some questions if people want to approach the microphones and ask Rebecca some direct questions.
There will be microphones at the end of either aisle, so feel free to come up and form a line or queue if you'd like. So we can start with the question over here.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
And I'm curious, two things, since color is so important to you. What is your favorite color in general? And have you been able to find it naturally in nature? And the sub-question is, if you currently have even a small garden, what kind of flowers you've chosen or plants you've chosen to put in them? Thank you.
So my favorite color since being a child is blue, and I have managed to find it in nature in pressing delphiniums. And if you see in the installation, they're right at the back of the room, and that would be my favorite section. And small garden, I do have a very small garden. Anything that I don't have to look after. that
So I
looks
assume that's
after itself.
perennials then?
Yeah,
you plant a lot of perennials?
I have an amazing jasmine in my garden that has an incredible scent, and that brings me a lot of joy. And also this climbing rose, which is just stunning in the spring especially. But yeah, I mean, I've managed to live in a place where I've been given plants that already exist that are amazing.
Do you want to talk about?
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Where your studio is?
Oh yeah, so my studio is in East London, and my house is on a street on Columbia Road, which has a flower market every Sunday. So I'm completely and utterly surrounded by flowers.
Yes, as a member of the staff here at the Art Museum, I've watched many a volunteer both day and evening come in and out of their green room to prepare for this. You said there was 10,000, and I was just curious. I watched the trays and I watched the volunteers, and you did acknowledge some of them, but I just wondered what the total number of volunteers that from the community that took part in this.
400 and wow. 1,600 hours.
16. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering if you have any words that you would like to say to any young aspiring artists who are interested in installation work?
Yeah, don't be afraid and go for it, because it's very difficult financially, especially when you finish art school, and just keep going, because you can be distracted, I think is the word. And I would encourage to do anything to support yourself part-time in the meantime, while you're continuing with your art practice, and don't get too distracted, you know. I think it's really, really difficult, especially now with a lot of art funding disappearing from education. But I would encourage any artist to just keep going, and keep going. And don't feel like you're not being loyal to your art by doing something part-time as well. I think sometimes an artist feels like they're not being true or pure or true to themselves if they have to do something else to survive, but that's not the truth, you know. Just keep going, and the art will speak for itself. It takes work.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that. I think Rebecca is such a incredible example. She's shared so honestly about her experience in art school. You make some terrible things along the way, and that's okay, because it's not about making an amazing thing every time that you create a work. It's about being committed to the process. And if you do that, the integrity kind of shines through over time. And so just really believe in that. Any other questions?
Actually, I just also...
Oh, there's a question
I
coming
just
from
wanted to say about interns as well. I just wanted to thank Kat, who's sitting next to Simon. She volunteered for a day and then ended up staying for the whole project. So just thank you, Kat.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure that I forgot to thank somebody really important, but please know that you are appreciated. That's just my human failing.
So I was wondering, how has motherhood changed your approach to your work since you're a new mother?
So having Alexander is pure joy, and I feel like I've been literally given a gift beyond understanding. But in terms of my art practice, time is so precious and different now. It's actually, if anything, it's made it clearer in what's important for me. So because there's less time, more is getting done in less time, and it's everything's got purpose, and there's no laziness to my art practice right now.
I was wondering whether you do anything special to preserve the color and the shape of the flowers for the duration of the installation and beyond, since you use old flowers from previous installation and new ones too.
I haven't treated any of the flowers. They are all air dried. But what I will say is the most colourful dried flowers in there are dried by experts in Normandy. I was lucky enough to stumble across some flower growers who are from a small holding in Normandy at a market in Dieppe, and they only provide flowers for me and themselves. And they're incredible. They pick the flowers. They are literally growing outside their house in the small holding, and they look at them every day and pick them at the exact right time. And they dry them in this little barn, and I go out twice a year to collect 2 van loads, and that's all they're allowed to leave their small holding. But yeah, they're very, very special flowers. And they're actually retiring in 3 years' time, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I'm hoping that they're going to teach me a few bits, but we'll see.
Someone just asked a question that's related to the question I was going to ask. But first to say, your installation was beautiful. It was hard to be in an event where it was timed. I wanted to stay there all day, and my long list of all issues and problems I had to tackle just melted away when I was there. I was curious. I work with dried flowers, and I thought when you talked about maybe the fails or disappointments when you created some of your very first installations, was there just a problem or a very long learning experience how to learn how to preserve those flowers and store those flowers? And I'm curious, if you travel and you bring some flowers with you, is everything taken apart and stored?
Every installation it depends on the installation, but after each exhibition, if it's temporary, then it gets boxed up. The garlands are, all of the wire stays on each flower, but the garlands are laid in with tissue into boxes, so they don't get tangled. But the rest of it is completely mashed together in one big lump. I can't think of a more elegant word. But the process of re-sculpting them because of the copper makes me less precious with them when they're put into these other boxes. But that's where the petal garlands and the flower garlands come into play, because if anything falls out or is not kept within the bundle of wire, we'll repurpose it. But I never really worry about the fragility of the flowers. When we put them into the boxes, they're held together already by the natural oils. So when they're drying, they dry onto the copper and with the natural oils holding it. If any were to be damaged, it's kind of rare. It all holds itself together. I mean, everyone gently puts them into the boxes and cuts them gently out in sections, and so there's a kind of duty of care to it. We don't lose a lot, and there aren't many failures. And because all of the material, whether it falls off the wire or not, is valuable to me, it's all reused. And yeah, I haven't had many problems with it as a material, to be honest.
Thank you.
My question is related, so I guess I'll go next. First of all, I haven't seen the exhibit. I can't wait. We're going upstairs right after this. Sort of in the same vein, I was so struck by your reverence for the material and for the connection to all things that represents. And you mentioned no waste and even dust and something about saving that and preserving. And I didn't quite understand the scope of that and what motivates, or I'd just love to hear you say more about the whole
Well, I think I started doing this at art school, and flowers are expensive. And I was lucky enough to be able to take the dahlias from my dad's nursery, but other than that, I had to beg and borrow from flower markets and wholesalers, and even buy flowers. And when you come from it as a student, when you're spending every single penny that you have on flowers that are naturally going to die, you start to really cling on to that material. And I think that's what it comes from, is actually there's so much value in that material for me, that it's important to hold on to it. So I think, for me, it's about, I think the motivation was initially because it was so expensive. And if you look at what's upstairs, 500,000 flowers is expensive. And I think I think the waste, especially knowing floristry and having some experience in that, especially in London, the amount of lorries that come into London daily, and with flowers that are that expensive that go to waste, immediately I was passionate about holding on to them.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say something in regards to the comment that was made previously about the time limit that we've put on the exhibition. We have done that in the first instance because we wanted to kind of control the crowd and watch for a while how it works. But if that proves to be a problem or we feel like that's disrupting people's experience, we might adjust that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that was said.
Okay.
I think we have time for one more question.
This is kind of a two-part question. So I know there's some parents in here with young children who are aspiring artists. What gift did your parents give you that you think is maybe the most valuable thing that helped you grow? And then maybe the second part is, what would you recommend or, hope for parents to do for young children who aspire to do similar things?
Well, my mum and dad are pretty amazing. And the gift that they gave me was being able to create something out of nothing. But not nothing, I mean, create out of what you see outside. So in that whole time of growing up in the garden and in the fields that surrounded us, we were never bored, and we always knew that we could make something. And that's through my parents directing us and showing us how to do that as well. So I think the fun and the play is very important, and the freedom. They weren't towering over us. They allowed us that space and that time to play, and I think that that's very important too. And the second question.
I think you answered it. I think it was,
Okay.
what was the gift of your parents, and then what would you recommend? So great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Scott, did you want to say something or? Okay. Thank you to Rebecca for being here.
Okay, thank you. Aww.
Thanks again, everyone, for being here. We look forward to seeing you up in Libby Court for the book signing. The museum is open until 5 p.m. I also want to thank all of you who participated in the production of this. It was an amazing story to hear told about how it came to fruition. We also want to make sure we thank exhibition sponsors, Taylor Cadillac, our year-long exhibition sponsor, Medica, especially the TMA ambassadors. I think a full fourth of those 400 volunteers were ambassadors. Raise your hands if you're an ambassador. Thank you especially for that. And finally, the Ohio Arts Council. They all were involved in making the exhibition possible. As for you being here, thank you for being part of the TMA community and Rebecca Louise Law's new community as well. Thank you all so much.